Welcome one, welcome all to Ben's Book Club, hosted by the Dukes of Gaming. My name is Ben, the Duke of Design, and I'm joined by my fellow Dukes, Cole, the Duke of Rocket League, Thomas, Duke of Procrastination, and Alfredo, the Duke of Education. We will be applying our unique gaming skill sets to take a close read of a single game today. You can find these book club discussions alongside our weekly show on your favorite podcast service or on YouTube. And you can find us on our socials, which are linked below in the description. Today, we have the pleasure of diving deep into a single game, that game being Ben Studios' 2019 open world epic, Days Gone. These discussions are full spoilers, so either strap in or play the game now. Before we begin mowing through the hordes of topics that this game inspires, I want to get a sense of everyone's overall experience with the game. Without any elaboration, without any accoutrements, just give me a thumbs up or thumbs down. Did you have an overall positive experience with this game or negative experience with this game? 3, 2, 1. Okay, some surprises here. I have had overall positive experience with this game. It seems like Alfredo's in agreement with me on that. And both Cole and Thomas gave us a thumbs down for overall negative experience with this game. So let's just jump right into it. I think the core of this game, and let me know if you guys agree, is the single character that we play as, Deacon St. John. Everything's seen through his eyes. Everything is his experience. And this game, as long as it is as tiresome that can be at sometimes, it is a really deep dive into this single character, a true character study. So everything we know and learn about this character often comes in the way that he interacts with the other characters that play in the story. So I thought it might be helpful for us to explore the way this story unfolds and the way that the character of Deacon St. John unfolds through the characters that he interacts with. So I want to start with Boozer, who's Deacon's friend from the motorcycle club, and longtime Apocalypse compatriot, and really kicks off the conflict of this game. What do you guys think about the relationship between Deacon and Boozer that opens up Act 1 for us?
What a question. I think I'll go first on this one. I thought Boozer is a very interesting character because he's, what I would foresee as, a stereotypical, biker guy. Like, he doesn't like to show his feelings, much like Deacon. They are just like ride or die, literally. But what's really interesting is that in Act 1, what they do, Days Gone, is that they kind of have something traumatizing happen to Boozer, which basically leaves him handicapped. Like, he gets his arm completely, cauterized and, burned off by a blowtorch. So it completely changes whoever this character was before and kind of makes him into, this, or leans more into his hot-headed, I'm not your friend, Deacon, I don't need help kind of nature, which I assume he was kind of like that before, but at the start of this game, we kind of only get to know him through that until Deacon kind of helps him through that phase in all of Act 1. Because, like you said, Act 1 is kind of about Deacon and Boozer and their relationship, and more, I would argue more about how Boozer is trying to, not be... He can't ride a bike. He can't do the normal things he's doing. He can't, be this biker guy that he normally is. So it's more of a study on how, what Boozer is going through and how Deacon can help him through it, even though he doesn't want his help. I didn't particularly enjoy Boozer as a character just because he always seemed to just be a complete hothead, and sometimes I was like, Boozer, come on, Deacon's your man, he leaves Sarah to be with you and to make sure you're okay. Right. And he's just an asshole sometimes, but that's how it goes. But they have a love-hate kind of relationship, more love than hate, but he's kind of an asshole.
So for me, I can't say I like any character in this game, but if there's any character that comes close to me liking them, it's Boozer. He feels like they plucked him out of Sons of Anarchy and put him in this game. And for that, I find him endearing. And they gave him a really good arc in terms of him dealing with his depression. Because once his arm gets categorized like that, and what subsequently happens after that, to his arm, it humbles him. And I thought that character arc, at the very least, I could take and be like, all right, I like that. So Boozer is probably my favorite character in the whole game. But unfortunately, that's not saying much.
That's
What
so
about you,
interesting.
Okay, so I'm coming at this from a different angle because I did not like this game. I did not like any of the characters. I was off put by everything. And this is like the best way I can describe it. And it's like, I hate to use Game of Thrones, but me and my wife tried to watch Game of Thrones so many times. Like I tried the first season, which this is a terrible example, and you'll see why. But so we tried to watch the first season. I promise you 5 or 6 times, and I hated it. I hated all the characters, hated the story, hated everything about it. I couldn't get into it. And then for some reason, the 7th time it clicked. But this game never clicked for me. So it's just an awful. So maybe you guys are going to sell me on this, but like, I eventually was just trying to power through it after, in the middle of the first little bit, and I just could not do it. I started putting on podcasts, and like the gameplay was really turning me away. So I'm kind of approaching this book club, listening to you guys, and I have a feeling that Ben and Alfredo are gonna sell me on this and make me want to play it. I can already tell, but we'll see. I just really did not like it. I didn't like. I mean, I guess we'll get into reasons why in the gameplay section and stuff, but from here forward, I'm just gonna I'll chime in and ask you guys questions, and I'm really here to listen for the story stuff, especially.
So Boozer, we really see in this game, especially in the first and second act, Boozer in some of the worst moments of his life, right? His even though the apocalypse happened, he still had his best friend, and they still had some semblance of a their motorcycle club between the two of them. They had each other's backs at least, and that's all. It seemed like that's all that Boozer really ever wanted, even if Deacon wasn't satisfied with that. But first thing we see is that Boozer is crippled in a way that means he cannot even ride his bike anymore, which is such a crucial thing to these two characters. And really, bizarrely, even though not everyone's in a motorcycle club, everyone rides motorcycles in Days Gone.
It's
like
convenient.
there's like almost no other vehicles. The way that they explain that is there's so many cars on the sides of the road that the highways are all clogged up, and the only good way to get around is on a bike, because you can.
I hated that reasoning, Ben. I hated that. I'm going like that would take probably 2 days to move all those cars. Like two long hard days to move those cars, and you have a car that can now protect you against the hordes. But I digress.
Yeah.
Well, there were a couple of like the survivors who actually were in cars and used them. Like there were this game does something where basically you have like little random events that pop up in the form of like you can save survivors. Like random people will be attacked, and some people will be in cars like driving it, and then it just stops, and like the hordes are attacking them, and you have to save them. So like some people drive cars, just not that many, I guess.
It's not the majority for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I you make a good point there, Thomas. In that it seems like a well motivated crew could clean up some of these highways pretty quickly, especially with the amount of cars that you physically move in the game.
Right, exactly.
Should be doable.
Yeah.
I guess my thing is, it seemed like they created the game, and then that was just a reasoning one designer had, like, oh, this is why they're only riding motorcycles.
Yeah, this is why we're not going to work on car mechanics.
Right, I would have just preferred, and even if it's a motorcycle game, I would have preferred they just didn't talk about that. I would have been completely, but when they tried to explain that, I was like, okay. But
it smacks of a post hoc justification rather than something that came first. I will say though, to that extent, something that I heard John Garvin talk about is that making the act of getting around this open world map, which whether or not this game needed to be an open world is probably another discussion, but making the act of getting around this open world map fun meant breaking up the highways so that the routes that you're taking are not all main roads, and that you have to often veer off into hilly areas or weave through trees, that kind of stuff, just to make the experience of driving from point A to point B more interesting. And I think that's something that they were able to deliver on quite well, because I played the game most recently on New Game Plus on the highest setting, which was Survival 2, which turned off my minimap, so that I was mostly just kind of heading in the direction of my waypoints rather than following the line on the street on the minimap. And you can get around pretty easily that way in this game, because you're not having to follow complex directions, and anytime there's a trail, you're pretty much on the right path for the most part. It's when you start going off road that things get a little trickier.
So, did you enjoy the driving physics? I mean, the motorcycle physics.
Yeah, so I also played, since it was New Game Plus, I had all of my motorcycle upgrades from the start. I do remember struggling with the bike for a while in my first playthrough of the game. It is weighty. It's a lot heftier than you might expect a motorcycle to be. But
it's floaty, real floaty and weighty. It reminds me of Grand Theft Auto 4, like the weighty cars and the real floaty physics. You remember people complaining about that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I guess my thing is with the motorcycle controls. I didn't hate them, but I thought they were in dire need of some great vibration in the controller.
Oh, I did too. I noticed that.
Like, I'm like, this feels way too heavy for me to not feel anything in the controller. And obviously that's, wishful thing. I wish they could have done that, but I think that could have added to it. I don't think they're terrible. They're not cyberpunk bad, but they're not a highlight of the game for me.
Did you guys fully upgrade your control, I guess, for your bike?
No. But so my thing is this: when the game feels like this, and a lot of games, open world games, have this problem. When the car or the vehicle feels like it's not connected with the ground, I felt like it was just weighty and it was just there. I don't know. I just didn't feel that, like, the connection with the terrain. You know what? I don't know how to describe it. It just did not feel good.
That's really interesting here, because I actually had the exact opposite experience in playing this. So in the beginning of the game, you do have access to, Deacon's, what I assume is his fully upgraded motorcycle. It gets, scrapped for parts and stolen, and then you have to build it up yourself. And the bike that I got afterward felt a lot better. And the way I did it, I was like, okay, so I know fully upgradable, it does not feel good. I don't like how it feels super floaty. Like, it just doesn't work. So I'm going to pick and choose which things to upgrade so that this bike feels the way I want it to feel. So I chose, for handling, I didn't fully upgrade it. I chose, like, the level I wanted. Like, I upgraded it, tested it out, see, kind of get my level of how I wanted it exactly. Did the same thing for, like, the speed, like the engine, like all the parts of the motorcycle. And by like the second act, probably, I was able to get it to a point where I felt, oh, this bike is actually really good. I like the way it runs. Like, this is my bike. And then I started like going into all the more customizable parts for like just the painting. And then by the end, like, I was like, this is my bike. Like, nothing's going to happen to my bike. And it felt good to me. Like, it felt like it was connecting. So it was interesting how it's just really interesting how typically in games like this, you would want everything to be maxed out and fully upgraded on the whatever tree they give you. But in my experience, I had to really customize it and not upgrade it fully at all in order to get it the way I wanted it to feel. And I don't think that was intentional by the developers, but it's what worked for me, and it made the game feel like it made me feel more connected to like my bike for me.
Yeah, that's cool. I think that is a unique experience too, because to your point, the the communication of these upgrades when you're installing them is that it's just the next level of the thing. So it's a straightforward, better choice to upgrade in the way that it's presented. It's just a better engine, better brakes, better whatever. Um, and there's no something I feel is actually a weakness with the way you interact with your bike is that there's no lateral movement. There's cosmetics, but it's either can you afford engine 4 or can you not afford engine 4 because engine 4 is better than engine 3.
Right.
And there's no tinkering beyond that you can do or customization to make the bike feel like it's your own. So I think you had a very unique experience, and I think an experience that a lot of people wanted out of this game in creating a bike that was unlike other people's bikes. But no, I think you found that experience because you sidestepped the intended design, which is a weakness of the inherent design with the bike upgrades.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. For me, it felt connected. The way I customized it, it felt connected. Whenever I rode it, it felt like a bike for me. So I ended up having a really nice bike, actual, like, the intended, I guess, anarchy experience.
Right.
For, like,
And
being
and
the
you
bike
and
club.
you felt like you had fashioned that experience for yourself.
Yeah.
Because you had made critical choices about what upgrades you were going to engage in and not engage in.
Exactly. And going further and, well, doing, like, customizing it, saying, oh, I want this paint, like, I want it to look this specific way. Like, it was actually fun after I had gotten it to feel the way I wanted it to feel.
So that's awesome because I mean I can't really say much because I didn't play as much as you did and I didn't get to do those upgrades. So that very well could have alleviated my problem there. But that was just one of the main reasons I bounced off of it. And another reason, well, the story wasn't compelling enough for me to stay on board. The movement felt the same way, like moving the character of Deacon felt the same way to me as the bike felt. He felt floaty and weighty. I messed with the dead zone settings and stuff. Now, this may be, maybe I came off a game. I don't even know what I played last where my character was really responsive. And then I went into that. It even happens, my favorite game is Grand Theft Auto. And even when I play like Assassin's Creed, and I'll go from Assassin's Creed to GTA, it feels terrible. So maybe it's just an acclimation thing that I'm just like, I should have taken more time to acclimate to it, but I kept trying and kept trying and I kept just bouncing off of it. I hated the way it felt. The bike and him both felt so floaty and weighty and just dead zone. You know, I don't know. It just felt
Right.
like that. So that was why I kept bouncing off.
I agree with you about him feeling floaty. I didn't like how he felt when he's off the bike. For me, yeah, as you're upgrading the bike, it does feel better. I don't think I got it ever to the point where I was comfortable with it. I kept coming back to this one game randomly because I think this game has one of the worst starts of a video game or at least a big time video game that I've played. Like one of the worst starts, and not just from a narrative standpoint. That aside, that's horrible. But that aside, just how the first couple levels was not feeling them, and I was thinking of Breath of the Wild. Now, this game, it's hard. I'm not going to compare it to Breath of the Wild, but Breath of the Wild, when you start off, you don't have anything, right? Like you are powerless, but it's still fun to play. Even though you have nothing, it's still fun to play. With this game, it starts off and it to me it just feels terrible. I don't like how the bike feels horrible. You have the worst gun. You have is it and it doesn't, I don't know what it is, but it just doesn't feel right at first. Now, as you continue, as you said with the bike and with almost everything else, as you go on, it feels better and better and better. But I think that start is like its biggest flaw to me. The start of the game in every direction is just to me, man, I wish this could have started off a little better. Maybe they could have given you a really good bike to start with and then you crash it. So you can see how this game, how good your bike can become. Or something like I've seen some games do that. I wish there was something they could have done that could have showed this is how good the game's going to be, but you got to get to this point.
Well, I think that's what they did with, Deacon's souped up bike at first, but the problem was that the bike itself did not, like the fully upgraded bike did not feel good. Like, I
Right.
hated it, and that's why I
That's
made
what I'm
the
saying. It
choice to
didn't feel
not
good at
upgrade it
all.
fully.
Right.
Yeah.
The way they rolled out the section of the first act in particular is a bone of contention for a lot of people. It's a very slow start. It's a very slow start to a video game. The way that they roll out these concepts in pretty linear order in a game that is meant to be open world and more free form, and you're running errands for Copeland for a while. It is. I mean, it really does let you know up front that if you're not ready for a slow burn of a game, then just leave, just pack it up, because this game is going to take its damn time with everything that it wants to explore. And I find that overall, this game to me is a game that has much it's like it's got so much that it wants to say and not enough mechanical paper to write all that story on. It spins its wheels over and over again with the same mechanics. You're clearing out camps. You're chasing down drifters
Bounties.
on your bike. Yeah, exactly. And your methods of engagement with the game are so few that they can't possibly be stretched out over a 70-hour playthrough the way this game seems to want. It's just they've got too little going on mechanically for all of the narrative that they want to convey in this time. And I think that the slow start with the bike is just a symptom of that. Though I'm not sure that the bike that they give you at the very beginning, I'm not sure how upgraded it is. I assume it does have some upgrades. But I played with it and I felt that it was clunky in my second playthrough. And then I got to Copeland's camp and got the new bike, and that new bike was my fully upgraded bike from my previous playthrough. And that felt great. That felt way better. So it definitely, the original bike that they gave you was not fully upgraded. It might have had some more upgrades than the one that they start you with. But they didn't quite give you that here's a taste moment. And they could have really used it too, and it could have been all the more heartbreaking for the player and for Deacon when his bike gets scrapped for parts. If you had a taste for a couple hours, because the intro is going to take its time anyway, right? So they might as well give you a couple hours with a really nice bike, and then have it taken away from you, rather than a 20-minute intro scene before it gets taken away.
I'll be honest with you, Ben. I think it was it was in dire need, because the one thing that you're doing in this game most is riding on that bike. It's the one thing that the game that's on the cover. You know what I'm saying? It's the core experience. Like, making that bike feel essential, I thought was, to me, essential for the games. And the game was so successful, of course. But I think if they had hit it out the park with just you could keep the same story, keep all the other stuff. If that bike feels super solid at the start, I think a lot of people will be singing a different tune about the game, to be honest.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. The problem is that even me getting to a point where I loved my bike toward the end, it took too long. This was I got it in Act 3, the beginning of Act 3, how I wanted it. That's Act 3, and that's what 25 hours later. It just takes too long, and people are not going to wait for that.
Me, I didn't wait for that.
There's a difficult question to answer here that Days Gone, I think, acts as an emblem of, where this game is so long. By the end, you're going to have some investment in what's going on, just because you've spent so much time with Deacon, you've spent so much time with Sarah, you've spent so much time with Boozer. You're going to have some investment. It's impossible not to, just because you've spent 40 to 70 hours with these characters. So the difficult question here, the balancing act, in lieu of really excellent character moments that come at you quickly, if you want to do something like a slow burn character study in a video game, which is what this game is through and through, how slow is too slow? How much time? Yeah, right. So, right, we've got the answer. We've got the answer. But how do you recognize that before it's done? Right? Before it comes out of the oven. We're taking way too much time with Deacon here. We're taking way too much time with Boozer. In fact, listening to John Garvin and Jet Frost talk about the game, they were worried that the game was going to be too short. And you can see that all over this game. Attempts to pad it out. Attempts to add more content. Attempts to add more engagement. And in ways that end up becoming fluff. Things that you don't really care about doing. Things that really aren't necessary to the story at all. This was totally made clear to me because of the contrast in the two ways that I played. The first time I played it, I played a platinum. I did 100% of the things that you can do in the game in my first playthrough. It probably took me 70 hours to do. Second time, I only played main story quests because it was New Game Plus. So I didn't need to do any side quest stuff in order to unlock, which is, we can get to that too. Even in the mainline playthrough, they could have cut a third of the story quests that were here.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you say that because like the actual gameplay, from what I found, was actually fun. Like taking out the hordes, doing the side quests, like taking out the camps, like the actual things that they had you do for the side quest stuff was actually pretty cool, to the point where whenever I came across like a camp to clear out, I always did it. Whenever like there was a horde place to burn, I always did it because it was fun to do it. But what was actually the slow burn for me was the actual story itself. It seemed like the actual story itself was being like drawn out to an extensive period. For example, a lot of times this game for some reason does the thing where we're going to throw you in this lengthy cutscene for 3 to 5 minutes. Then we're going to make you do a like 2 to 3 in-game cutscene where these characters are talking to each other. You're very slowly walking, or you're slowly riding your bike at like a capped speed so that you can hear the conversation. And then it just throws you into a totally another cutscene. And it was very, very, very frequent, to the point where I was like, okay, here we go. It was like very heavy-handed story moments. And these story moments were not just, main story plots. They were like character development moments, like flashbacks with Sarah. There were, flashbacks just with Deacon, and there were just a lot of different moments that they were doing that they didn't exactly have to do, that made everything seem so long and drawn out. In comparison to the actual gameplay, which was like taking out freakers, doing these missions, like doing things in the present day, I found that really, really fun. And they kind of like forced me to slow down by, taking a deeper look into these specific characters and their backgrounds, which made it way longer and kind of drew me out of the actual story itself.
I've heard somebody compare this to like seasons. Like this should have been, I think, was it Ben, maybe we talked about it a while back ago. He compared this, said this would have been like an awesome, you think about it in terms of a season of a show. You think this game could have been 2 games? Could have been Days Gone 1 and Days Gone 2, or would that even worked?
It's more like 3 games.
Oh my god!
Because there's 3 acts.
Game's a nightmare.
Yeah, it's more like 3 games because there's 3 acts, and each act takes somewhere between 10 and 20 hours. So it's it truly is a season of television length for each of these acts, and each act takes you to a new location, introduces you to a new cast of characters, and gives you a new primary problem that you need to solve, and either an antagonist or some trouble in the world. So it really, in its structure, it absolutely feels like 3 distinct seasons of a single TV show, where there's this one overarching plot line through the whole thing, Deacon's quest to find Sarah. And that doesn't resolve until season 3. But it's there, it's present from season 1. But what resolves at the end of season 1 is Boozer being safe. He is not going to die anymore. Boozer taken care of. What resolves at the end of season 2 is Deacon having to face his past in order to take down the trouble plaguing the only really good camp that exists in the area, Lost Lake Camp. So Deacon has to face what he did in the biker gang in horrifically burning Carlos, the leader of the Rippers, in order to take down the gang and save Lost Lake Camp.
And that's
then
where
they
it should have ended.
Yeah. That could have been one game in 2 parts. Yeah.
That's a good point.
And then we get
It kept going.
Yeah, then we get what feels like an equally long third act in a totally new section of the map where finally the Sarah thing is resolved in a way that I actually think was quite good compared to the way that the Carlos thing was handled. I think the Deacon's reuniting with Sarah was so. Let's talk about that. Sarah's a central figure to this whole game. Totally crucial. She's Deacon's last real nugget of humanity. He loves Boozer, but by the time we meet him, he's already gone off the deep end because he firmly believes that Sarah's gone. And then he doesn't, and then he does again, and then he doesn't. So what do we think about Sarah's character, and what do we think Sarah says about Deacon in this character study?
Did anybody think she actually died in Act 1?
No.
No, they weren't fooling anybody.
See, that's a failure. Because it's like there was no like when we find out she's alive, I'm just like, all right. I was waiting for the whole game for that to happen. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's a failure of storytelling. Like that should have been a genuine surprise. Like I was just waiting the whole time. I was just waiting like when are we gonna find, when's she gonna come back? Act 3,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that was my criticism of that.
I don't want to do too much of this could have been, would have been type of stuff. But I did have an idea when Deacon sees Sarah in the flesh for the first time. How much more impactful could that moment have been if we had never seen Sarah before? If we didn't know what she looked like, if we didn't know what she sounded like, and we just saw the look on Deacon's face for half a minute and saw the realization dawn on him. So that we think, before we even get to see her for the first time, that's her. He found her. He really did. She's alive. How much...
This is why you're the Duke of Design.
Exactly.
Ben Studios,
Yeah,
hire Ben. Hire Ben.
The problem is that they couldn't have done, all their excessive flashbacks with, Deacon and Sarah and made you, connect with what their relationship actually was. But like you're saying, that could have worked in their favor.
Let me tell you guys something that I really love about what they handled with the way they handled Deacon reuniting with Sarah. They don't fall right back in love. It's not right back to where they were. It's not a tender embrace and yay, it's been so long and I never believed that you were dead. It's been years. We're like strangers. It's not like it was. So much has gone wrong. So much is different. I really did think you were dead. I really did think you were dead. I didn't think I was ever going to see you. I gave up. And here you are. So what does that mean for us? The way that they, and this is one thing where the pace of the game is really justified in this moment. The way that these characters need time to fall back in love with one another and to get to know one another and to remember why they were married in the first place. It's crucial. I mean, it's just totally crucial. And I think that because it was handled that way, the whole thing feels real in a way that it often doesn't in this type of media.
That's awesome. I like that. The fact that they, I didn't get that far, but the fact that they did that is incredible. That's one of my favorite things. I hate it in movies when they force the kiss. Like, it's more impactful. Don't force it. Don't do that. unless it's like earned and it's there, whatever. But like when movies back out of doing that, I love it even more because, you know, just like Ben said, that's way more impactful. The fact that they didn't embrace and like, well, they're back to normal. They fall in love again and they've been through so much. That's really awesome. That's cool.
What I was, I guess, confused about the reunion, I did like how it was handled, but a part of me kind of was like, okay, why is this a secret exactly? Basically, there, Sarah's in this camp where it's like men and women aren't allowed to, be together essentially because, that would just introduce too many complications into this militarized camp. What I guess I was just a little bit taken aback by the fact that, okay, like, is it really that bad if you were to say this is my wife from X amount of years ago? Like, what's the worst that can happen? Like, I get that it's a military, but I was just taken aback by the fact, like, I really don't think it would matter that much, and this doesn't have to be like your little secret for the big camp. But that was just me. What did you guys think about that?
The secrecy made sense to me only because I thought about the way that Deacon introduces himself into this whole scenario.
Mm-hmm.
His acceptance into the militia is contingent on him being alone, not having come from another camp, not having people who are waiting for him, not having people who could be right around the corner ready to ambush the militia. Mm-hmm. Should Deacon say, give the code word, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, to the extent that the colonel, he's a colonel, right? I forget exactly what the
Colonel Garrett?
To the extent, yeah. To the extent that he knows that Deacon and Sarah are married, it's just going to open up too many questions. And this guy, we come to find, is not particularly stable. Not particularly rational person.
Fair.
So maybe the question is, why did they know enough to keep it secret? Well, why did Deacon know enough to keep it secret?
Right, because he just walked in. I mean, he did do a couple missions, with the other lieutenants and got a feel of the camp itself. So, like, you could definitely argue that he would, know what's up. But it just taking a little aback for me. A little weird.
What did you? So this was one thing that I wanted to say. I mean, to Alfredo's earlier point, if we hadn't seen Sarah up to that point, we wouldn't have gotten all the lovely flashbacks that people love to complain about that built their characters. But we might have still been able to get those flashbacks, but they would have come after they're reuniting when Deacon is going through the process of learning to love Sarah again, and Sarah's going through the process of learning to love Deacon again. That's when you show them falling in love for the first time. So you get to experience it as they re-experience it. That could be even more impactful. The only problem there is that you don't have a strong understanding of what's driving him the entire way through
to get to her
through the first two acts.
I don't think you needed all the flashbacks back there, but I think the first one where they first meet, I think that one would have been really good in the third act. I like the idea of kind of taking those, to me, out of place flashbacks. I thought when I first saw the first one specifically, I was like, why is this here? I think that one would have definitely fit better when they're trying to find love again. I think that would have definitely helped the game a little bit.
That one and the wedding one. The wedding one the wedding flashback where, it's just them two and nobody else came to their wedding besides Boozer. That kind of cemented to me like, okay, like she's the one for Deacon, and that's why he's like so focused on, finding out if she's alive or if she's not, and if she is, he needs to get to her. So, I mean, it made sense where they put it. So I don't know if it would have worked quite as well in the third act, just because, just like Ben said, we wouldn't know what exactly would be driving him all that time.
That's one of the most criticized scenes as far as I've seen. I've watched some reviews because she said something like, ride. I hope you ride me like you ride your
Your
bike.
bike. Yeah.
Now, to some people thought that was corny. I was like, I watched Son of Anarchy. I've seen a lot of biker stuff. Like that's something they actually say. And that was one thing I was like, this game really does capture biker culture better than any other video game. I want to give it credit on that. Like it really did capture a lot of those little things that the biker games that I have played haven't touched. I thought that was a good part of the game for me.
Which has never been done before, right?
Right.
Yeah, no,
Ride to
I would say,
Retribution.
yeah, I I would
Wait,
say
what'd you say?
definitely
What?
not to this extent.
What game?
I think it was
Ride
Ride
to
to
Hell,
Hell.
Retribution.
Retribution. That's the only other one.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
That's a good point too. Maybe we should talk a little bit about the way that this game was received, because the scene that you're calling out there, Thomas, I remember it being called out in multiple reviews. I think IGN or GameSpot called it out as being like, this is an example of the bad dialogue in Days Gone.
GameSpot for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and I can't I could not possibly disagree more. Now I think part of this is a flaw in the way that the game presented this concept, but that moment where Sarah says, promise me that you'll ride me as much as you ride your bike," as corny as that line is, she didn't invent the line. And she says in a subsequent flashback, which we understand happened before the wedding, she says, "We're not going to have one of those biker weddings where I have to say, ride me as much as you ride your bike," right? And
Right.
Deacon goes, "Har, har, har, no, of course we're not, because I'm not going to make you into my ideal biker woman. You are who you are." And then for her to say that in the moment, in her vows in the wedding, is her accepting Deacon as who he is, as somebody that's not, that's not from her sphere. Like this is you've got two characters who are from totally different worlds, and this is her saying, "I'm willing to meet you where you are. I'm willing to be where you are because I love you, and I'm going to make that sacrifice." That's a huge character moment. That's not bad writing. That's great writing.
Yeah,
Just
I love
because you
that
don't
scene.
just because you don't like the content of the line doesn't mean that the writing is bad. And
It makes
it
me
is silly.
think they didn't even play it. Like something,
Right.
It makes me think that they just saw that. I mean, IGN's notorious for that.
Well, I mean, there is a lot of dialogue in this game. There's a lot of dialogue and there's a lot of cutscenes. So, like, you're gonna miss some stuff.
I'll defend that
Yeah.
part, not the whole dialogue in the game, but I'll defend that part and the overall just relationship between Deacon and Sarah, I'll defend that. But yeah, no, there are a lot of bad dialogue moments in the game that I didn't like. But I do think that stuff like that was overly criticized. I don't think it's cringy writing. I
Yeah.
just don't think a lot of it's particularly good.
So what are some of the, because I've tons of problems with some of the writing in this game. What are some of the problems that you guys, what are things that stand out to you as problematic writing?
One, I did not like what's his name, Copeland.
Copeland.
That and there was a lot of him.
Yeah, there's
Especially
a lot of
early
Copeland.
Still in the first act, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there because look, I don't mind like the content per se. Like, I've listened to Rush Limbaugh radio and stuff like that. Like I've heard that style and everything. Like I get it. But I was just like, a lot of this stuff is not it's not being delivered well to me. And there's a lot of it. Like a lot of the radio conversations is where I feel the dialogue really slacks. Like a lot of the Boozer stuff where Boozer's talking to you on the radio and Deacon's responding. I'm just like, this is not a good conversation in my opinion. It's not capturing me.
That in particular is kind of, I guess this would be kind of like a bug in the game. So we are playing these games when they've been patched. This is 2 years after release. Like I expect
PS5 version.
certain, I expect it to be like better than what it was, and it might be. But experiencing like the walkie-talkie kind of conversations, and sometimes they would just cut out completely. And then, it would start again, but it would not start from where you left off the conversation. It would start the entire conversation all over again. So, like, modern games like God of War, like, they usually have conversational dialogue in the boat, like, when you're doing when you're in the game and doing random stuff. And like if you stop to do a story task or like an actual item or step away for a second, they'll pause the conversation. This game does not do that at all. Like it'll have the conversations be completely cut off. Sometimes they never start back again. Sometimes they do, but they'll start the conversation up again as if they never even were talking about that in the first place. So,
I mean, here's my thing about that. Because there's so many ways they could have handled it. And they decided to just make it a random thing. Like, for example, like with Spider-Man or God of War, like when you're talking to somebody, you go fight some criminals, the conversation stops, and you get back on like, oh, okay, I'm back, and then they'll continue.
right,
With
exactly.
this game, that could happen, or they could continually talk while you're fighting a horde, or it just restarts the conversation from the beginning once you're done. And I'm like, like I would have been fine if they just picked one of those things, just one,
Yeah.
just make it consistent. That was a big flaw to me. That was
Mhm. For me, getting back on topic as to the characters that just did not deliver, the number one character for me was, I believe her name was Lisa. Do you guys know who I'm
Yeah.
talking about? It
I
was,
like
Yeah.
I like Lisa.
Basically, oh, did you? I hated
Yeah, I
her.
like Lisa.
No,
Aw.
she did not work for me. She was trying to be like a kind of Days Gone version of like Ellie, or like this little girl who you're trying to like protect and see, trying to make her grow up. They were trying to do that whole thing, and I don't know, none of it really worked for me. It The moments that they gave her just didn't really ever pan out for me. They basically introduce her as a sweet girl. You have an escort mission to get her out, and then it's kind of like that every single time you're dealing with her. Oh, Lisa ran away. You have to go get her. And, they have a conversation saying, like, Deacon says, you need to go back because this is what's good for you. And she doesn't want to do it. And it's that the entire, like, first act until she eventually, runs away to the, what are they called? The,
The Rippers.
yeah, until to the Rippers joins that group, and then she is supposed to have like a redemption where she's the one who frees Deacon, and it just did not work for me. It just didn't. Whenever they would have conversations together, I just rolled my eyes.
I like Sarah. I will say though, she is part of literally my least favorite mission in a video game that I played this year. The first time we meet her, and we're getting her out of the house, and then the bear. I was like,
Yeah, the
this
Raiders.
is so out of place. And why are we fighting this bear? Why don't we just run away?
That did feel like Tomb Raider dinosaur kind of moment.
It
Just
literally
randomly
was like
appears.
we're just fighting the bear just because. No narrative reason. Just fighting the bear.
It's
Oh,
because
that-
now is the time for the bear boss battle. That's the
Yeah.
Right.
This is
And I was
all
like, this
good.
is a horrible boss battle too. Like, I'm like, oh my god, this is horrible. But yeah, I like Lisa overall, but yeah, that was not a great introduction.
I think a better introduction to the Rager Bears is in the very first mission when you go to the militia area. It's like the first thing you do when you meet the militia guys, and that one is a pretty fun fight. It doesn't seem to come out of nowhere because you like stumble across these guys in conflict with the bear.
And
But
that
yeah,
way
I agree.
you're more also like you're in Act 3, you have like way better weapons, you have way better gear, like you're more equipped to like do different things in that boss battle, in my opinion.
The bears in the third act were freaker bears, right?
Yeah, they were like even more souped up.
Yeah, like the bear you
Basically.
fought in the beginning was just a regular
Just a
ass
bear.
bear. That's why.
It's just a
That's
bear.
why I was like,
That's
what
right.
is this doing here?
You're right.
Like it was cool. Yeah, in the third act, yeah, you're right. That was actually I thought it was pretty good. But yeah, that first bear fight.
I want to go back real quick because this game has some really bizarre presentation issues for a game of its class, for a game of its budget, and Sony first party exclusive. The way the game has to fully cut to black every single time before a cutscene.
Yes.
The rough
Yes.
transitions, especially after having played games like God of War and Ghost of Tsushima that handle the stuff just much more gracefully than this game does. It's extraordinarily staccato and bizarre in the way that this is like systemic type of stuff for the way that the narrative is presented. And some of this is like what you talked about, Thomas, but there's the way the transition between gameplay moments to cutscenes back to gameplay moments is one thing. The way that radio conversations sometimes repeat in a frustrating way. This is like poor systems implementation for narrative content delivery. Then there's like a second class of weirdness, which is, why did you present it this way? You didn't have to. There's nothing systemic about this. One of those is the cutscene that you see, the flashback to the outbreak day when Deacon and Boozer and Sarah are fleeing the city. And this cutscene stomps on every single emotional moment to fast forward to the next one. It's like she gets stabbed, and then there's not even a second for Deacon to like be scared about it before they're on to the next section of that cutscene. And then Deacon shoots somebody, assuming, the way that they present it is like he's never killed a person before, which, okay, yeah, sure, I believe it. He was a criminal, but he didn't necessarily kill anybody. So he kills this guy, and he's like, oh my God, cut to black, cut to new cutscene.
Yep, and then he's fine in the next one.
Yeah, no room to breathe, no room for it to sink in. It's like there's 5 emotional moments in this whole sequence, and this is like the one time where they don't want to give it room to breathe when they're setting up. So that's one of those things where I was like, why did you guys do it this way? There's another one, and this happened semi-frequently, but the most egregious one was during one of these missions with what's his name, the Nero guy that you
O'Brien.
You have a contentious radio conversation with O'Brien over a cutscene, and then the cutscene ends, and O'Brien and Deacon talk about the exact same thing during gameplay. This type of thing happens all the time, where there's some ground covered in a cutscene, but it's like the gameplay writers and the cutscene writers were 2 different writers' rooms, and they were both given the same outlines, and they were both told, okay, you have to write for each of these story beats. So then they both did all of the story beats, so you're just getting this repetition. I did this in a cutscene, and now I have to go back over it in game dialogue. The way that I think about this, the way that I describe this game, is that it is totally overwritten. There's too much writing for the amount of stuff that's happening in the game. I had one example of this that I had to write down because it was so ridiculous. Ricky calls to tell Deacon to come to Lost Lake Camp, and for some reason Ricky says like, "Hey Deacon, when you got a minute, head back to Lost Lake Camp," and then Deacon has to come on and say, "Oh, hey Ricky, you probably have a job for me, huh? Okay, yeah, I guess I'll head back when I have a second." He's repeating everything that she just said. He's taking twice as long to do it, and he did it. It's like it didn't even need to happen. All he needed to say was, "Got it, Ricky," and then the quest thing to go back to camp pops up. That kind of stuff is all over Days Gone, and it makes the characters feel less realistic than they do in the cutscenes. It makes Deacon feel more annoying as a character because he's constantly talking to himself. So,
Stealth Nero segments of the game where you're stealthing up to these Nero agents who are apparently so powerful that you can't even get caught by them. You can't even shoot them. Nothing will affect them. That's another problem. But you have to sneak up to them and stay for these super lengthy dialogues that aren't really a great way to, tell this narrative story. But that whenever I had those, I just was like, okay, here comes like a exposition of like what's happening, and there were just so many better ways that they could have did it, and I'm not sure why they decided to do it that way, but yeah, I hated those Nero stealth missions.
Do you think this is kind of evidence, like you said, that they were worried about padding the game? They were worried it was going to be short, and this is just another piece of evidence towards that.
With
I'm
the
not
Nero
sure.
sections?
I'm not sure that the Nero section.
No, not that. I'm referring back to the just the excessive overwritten part.
No, because it doesn't. It's annoying because oftentimes you will finish what you were doing mechanically, gameplay wise, before the story beat is even done.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess in that way that it's padding out your gameplay experience, but no, it doesn't seem to be like, it's not really like adding anything. It's just more description and more opportunity for the characters to speak. But it's not really padding out the runtime. I would say the Nero sections maybe, but I think this is a better instance of what I was saying earlier, where there's too much story to tell with the gameplay that they have. And clearly stealth was not like a big pillar of this game, but they have these extensive stealth sections that are most reminiscent of the Mary Jane and Miles Morales sections of Spider-Man 2018 to me. Except they do convey pretty interesting story. At least I thought, what's going on with the Freakers is a fairly interesting part about this game to me.
I would argue it does have good stealth mechanics. When you're dealing with the Freakers and you're dealing with, the other, human enemies, with those Nero sections in particular, those to me, it's like, you're breaking the logic of the game. Like, we're fighting bears, but we can't take out these Nero people.
Yeah.
Like, like that
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Now, I get it. I guess they want to make it, these people are valuable. You don't want to be seen by them. It makes sense narratively. But somebody just didn't take the time to say, you're fighting bears in this game. You're fighting you're fighting infected people. You can't, we're not going to let him be able to take out these, let's be honest, scientists.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I mean, even in non-lethal ways, you could have easily knocked him out, kind of like Metal Gear Solid style, non-lethally. But no, as soon as you're seeing Deacon's hands go up, it's game over screen.
It breaks the
that's how they
immersion,
handle it.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I guess the justification for that is that you're trying to help O'Brien keep his cover, so you're trying to do it all without, to be seen is to fail in what O'Brien is asking you to do. But yeah, I totally agree. It's because it's very abrupt, and it totally breaks the flow of the game experience when you get these story critical missions where you have to just sit and wait and listen. Right. Those were the parts to me, much more so than picking the flowers with Sarah by the lake, or having the really slow guided motorcycle sections. The Nero sections to me were the ones that felt like just pace shattering.
Could have been a cutscene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It could have been. But like we said, one would argue there's too many cutscenes in this game.
There's too much everything in this game.
There's a lot of dialogue and there's a lot of story in this game, and they could have done a lot more without saying too much. Like, for example, certain characters that I argue actually made this game why I enjoyed it so much. And that is Ricky, Iron Mike, and Schizo. They completely made this game 1,000 times better. For me, those three characters were done well because they had just enough story into each of their specific backstories. You were given specific missions with them that actually explain who they are as a person and Deacon's relationship with them. And they completely nailed them with all three of those characters. When I first met Ricky, as soon as she started talking, I was like, okay, I need more of this. Like this is a good character, and I really like what they're doing here. Like, and then from there, the entire Iron Mike's camp section, that was my favorite part of the entire game. The stakes were very well done, in my opinion. They made you get attached to that camp in particular, and the end of Act 2 felt like it was like, okay, like I actually care about what's happening to these games or to these characters, especially, with Iron Mike ending up dying and them having to figure out what happens with his camp and who's going to step up to leadership. I felt like that was the best part of the game, and I just really wanted, the next act, which I had no idea was coming at the time, to kind of follow in that lead. And the highs that I experienced with that act 2 never really were able to, the game wasn't able to get above it because they weren't able to, make me either hate those characters like Schizo, like I absolutely hated, but it was good because I was like, okay, Schizo, like they did it well enough that I felt something for the character and not just, man, this character's fine. Like I feel nothing about this character.
Yeah, I definitely feel that the Lost Lake section is as much as I liked the whole reuniting with Sarah aspect of the malicious section. I think the Lost Lake section is definitely the strongest part of the game. The only part that's let down about that section is that it's not the gameplay culmination because you still don't have the tools to properly take on the hordes, which we'll get to the hordes. But yeah, I think Ricky might be my favorite character in the game.
Yeah, same.
I don't know.
She's awesome.
I don't know what you guys think about that, but she, to me, I'm not sure how much of the writing contributed to this, but she was the best actress for sure out of the entire cast. Some of the most naturally delivered dialogue that I've ever heard in a video game.
She felt like a real person.
Yeah.
Whereas all the other people felt like they were these stereotype, like, fit in, like, this particular mold. Like, she felt alive and like a real person.
Yeah. Yeah. And she had emotional moments. She had a stake in what was going on. She wanted something from Deacon. She wanted him to commit to Lost Lake Camp. But she was not melodramatic or over the top. She was a character that you wanted to spend more time with.
And you could count on her too. At least I felt you could.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm not sure how much more there is to say about Ricky. I will say to the point I was making earlier. I think each of these primary characters in each act. I think Boozer is the primary character of the first act. I think each of them are meant to say something in contrast or in comparison to Deacon about his characters, as he's the primary vessel through which the entire experience is channeled.
Which is Boozer, interesting because I don't know about you guys, but I didn't feel like Deacon was like a great character. I kind of felt like meh about him the whole way through. What about you guys though?
This is part of what I'm trying to get at. Boozer reveals about Deacon his loyalty, I guess, first and foremost. Ricky cuts a little bit deeper into Deacon's motivation, but really what is displayed there is that he has the opportunity to make a life, and he chooses not to make a life in the apocalypse, because a post-apocalyptic game could be all sorts of different things. But Ricky demonstrates to Deacon that he could be making a life. He could be committing to something. He could be fighting for something that's bigger than him, and he refuses to for whatever reason. And we understand that reason to be Sarah and his tether there. And then Sarah really seems to embody what's left of Deacon's humanity. He's got something like an animalistic kind of brotherly bond with Boozer, this tribal bond that he's got through the MC to Boozer. But something conscious, something chosen, a commitment actively made is not possible for him except through Sarah. Deacon is bizarre and deranged character who screams to himself while he kills people. He's like, you kill somebody, and he says, "Yeah, you like that? You want some more?" Like he's like the Raiders from Fallout 3. And
Well, I
he's
love him, man.
yeah, he's the protagonist of this game. That's something that I really thought was compelling about him when I first started playing the game. I never played a game with the protagonist who is so on his face unlikable. And at least at the beginning, it seems to be intentional that he's unlikable. He's kind of insane. He's kind of unhinged. He's constantly gasping for breath, too. So I guess maybe I'm answering my own question here, but I was thinking about his interaction with these characters and these kind of character traits that are revealed about him, and he is in fact a fairly deep character. And yet, why does he feel like he's not? Why does he feel like he's not a very good character? Like he's kind of wooden, like he kind of doesn't really ever click into place?
I think I have the answer.
What's the answer?
I think I do too, but you go first.
I think mainly that cutscene him feels a lot different than gameplay him.
Yep.
Like when he's just talking, it just doesn't sound right. Like when he's like fighting an enemy, he's like, "Yeah, you want that, huh? Yeah, you." I'm just like, who are you right now? Who is this? Where's the deep character I just saw in the cutscene? Like I knew from even like the first couple levels, like when he's talking to Boozer after Boozer's, arm, like he's trying to make Boozer feel a little better, But then once he's back in the gameplay when you're on the bike, he's just saying whatever. And I'm like, obviously, it just the vibe is different. I don't know if they recorded the actors like dialogue lines different than the cutscene lines. I don't know what it was, but the vibe was just completely different cutscene to gameplay.
I was gonna tap on a little of that because I felt like it was more the reason also is because kind of what we tapped on earlier in that they didn't give Deacon enough emotional and character moments in the cutscenes. Like you were saying, Ben, like they something happens that is like that Deacon is emotionally invested in. He's given about 2 to 5 seconds to process that and for the player to process that, and then it fades to black and then you're on to the next scene. Like there's something very it makes you not be able to, at least me, it makes me not be able to connect with Deacon because I'm seeing him in this emotional state and then it's immediately cut off. And then in the gameplay, like Thomas is stating, he feels like somebody different. Like whatever happened in that cutscene isn't really affecting him. And you only get that sometimes where, take for example when he's raiding at the end of Act 2 where he's, going to get revenge on the Rippers camp for, killing Iron Mike and burning down their town. Like that, I felt like he was justified in, kind of going more into his gameplay Deaconness where he's like, yeah, you like that? Like, I'm killing all of you guys. All of that. But they just didn't give him enough time in the cutscenes. And the gameplay transitions don't help it at all.
This might be a symptom of maybe the team size or the typical scope of game that Sony Bend was used to making, because in games larger than this, maybe take Red Dead 2 for an example, the kind of system driven dialogue that Arthur Morgan has is informed by where he is, what stage of the journey he's on, because he becomes a very different character by the end of the game. And it's the same thing with Deacon, but the systems-driven dialogue, I guess what you would think of as like more generic dialogue, doesn't evolve with him. It kind of always stays where it was. So it sometimes it matches fairly closely, sometimes it's way off in tenor. I think one example of, and maybe this isn't even a dialogue problem, but one example of this bizarre mismatch is the whole church scene. The fact that you need like two shootouts in the middle of the remembrance of the wedding. You guys remember that section where
Yeah,
he's
I do.
remembering getting married, and then you just need like a gunfight for some reason. That to me smacked of insecurity about other moments in the game where the flashbacks were too long-winded, like when you're picking flowers with Sarah, or when you're in the golf cart with what's her name from the second camp, Tucker.
Yeah, that girl.
When you're at Tucker's camp and you go in the golf cart with her and you ride around the entire camp. Lots of people complain about that because it's like a 2-minute unskippable cutscene where she drives you around the camp. So it seems like they got some like feedback to that end, and they were working on the church scene still. So they're like, all right, let's just break it up with some combat. It doesn't make any sense for the moment. And I feel like that's much the case with the way that Tegan's character is expressed in other ways. I think you guys are right about the mismatch there. You never know exactly what to expect from the character at any given time because he says one thing and then he does another. And it's not just through gameplay. It's not just things that you make him do that create that dissonance. It's things that he does, it's things that he says that are not really prompted by what you're doing, that are at odds with what he just did in the cutscene.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's quite a lot. That's quite a lot to have covered. I think maybe we should close on a couple of the strengths, what I see are a couple of the biggest strengths of this game. One being the setting in Oregon. I can't think of a more beautiful place to set the post-apocalypse.
Mm-hmm. This game is beautiful,
than rural
especially
Oregon,
on the PS5.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a total postcard.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if I don't know. Maybe this is somewhat to the game's detriment because it never feels as much like an apocalypse as it could, because there was never much there to begin with. It was mostly the wilderness. So
Right.
it's a little hard. It's kind of like Far Cry 5, where it's harder to remember what you lost.
Mm-hmm. That's fair.
When the place is so largely unchanged. But so another major strength, I think, is the Freakers, but specifically the Hordes, the battles with the Hordes, which I strongly feel that this entire game was made for those battles with the Hordes. It was one of the first things that they showed at the very first gameplay trailer. So they had this concept that you're going to be fighting these massive hordes of zombie enemies from a very early state, and they had it playable from a very early state.
Yeah.
What do you guys think about these Freaker Horde fights?
It had a Dead Rising feel to it, which I thought looked very impressive. I think as far as like a technical achievement, like that's the technical achievement of the game, having that many Freakers on the screen at one time never not looked impressive. It never not looked impressive. Like it always was a treat to be in those gameplay environments. I think the Freaker combat probably in general is the highlight of the game, especially in the situations that naturally come up in the game. Like, for example, everybody, I feel like at least once in the game has been low on gas.
Yeah.
And you have to trek. You have to make at least a small trip to get gas. And those to me are when Days Gone shines as an open world game, because you're just left to the gameplay devices now. Like they've given you all the tools. You know you have to get gas. You know there are Freakers on the way. What are you going to do? And I think that when you're in those moments, which are completely absent from the story,
Yeah.
you know, in those moments, I really do think the game shines.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think they only force the hordes on you in two specific moments in the game, and that's when you're first task. Okay, here's the horde. Here are some weapons. You need to take them out. And then the second time they do it is in the red mill, that you have to
Mhm.
clear out this red mill, and you have complete total reign to do it however you want.
Right.
And I agree with you. It is where the game shines most, honestly. Even in those scripted moments, you them putting you here saying this is the horde, you seeing like hundreds of zombies
Yeah.
against you, and you having to figure out how exactly you're going to do it with a plethora of different weapons, traps, any way you want to do it. And it's really fun too. And what's interesting is that the freakers themselves, like even when there's only a couple of them, like they're not pushovers exactly, especially in the early game. Like one zombie could take you out
Yeah.
if like you really wanted. They're dangerous, and
Strength
it
in
does a really
numbers.
good job. Yeah, it does a really good job in making you feel like okay, one is dangerous, but a lot of them like you have to create a plan, and if you don't have one, you need to run and figure it out on the way. I think it does a really good job with the set pieces for where they put those hordes and the different things that you can do with them, like you diving through like a tube in order to create some distance, and then the freakers have to pile on top of each other, get around. You know, pulling on the wooden panel to let logs crush a bunch of zombies. Like you having those movie moments to make you feel like a badass, and it works really well, and it feels really good as well.
Yeah, I think what I love most about the Freaker Hordes is the yeah, that calm before the storm moment where you're trying to lay a few traps before they see you, and you just get these glimpses of just what you're up against, and it's just hundreds. You know, it's literally hundreds of these things, and the whole time you're thinking, oh my god, how the hell am I going to do this? And then you're like laying a bomb, and then you hear one sees you. You're
And
like,
then they all come
fuck,
for you.
I'm not ready. Yeah, so you're on the run, and you're figuring it out as you go. And yeah, it's like exactly what you're talking about, Alfred. You grab the box so that everything else tumbles down. It buys you 5 more seconds so that you can get to the next area, and you can catch your breath, and you can turn around, you can shoot a couple of them, and you're just on your heels like that for 2, 3, 4 minutes straight before you're finally beginning to clear through them, and you're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, and then you're hoping against hope that you don't run out of ammo before
Exactly.
you clear them all. It's so good. It's like you the game stays so intense in those moments that you can't think of anything beyond the next moment. What's my next move?
Hmm.
What do I go left? Do I go right? Do
Yeah,
I duck under here? Do I reload?
another way that they create those movie moments is with the Nero checkpoints that you can clear. So to basically create fast travel points, but on these Nero checkpoints, sometimes they have well, all the time they'll have like these giant speakers that will, if you power it up, it will attract the hordes. And sometimes those speakers are hidden very, very well. So
Yeah.
what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to cut them all off so no hordes will come. But if you forget one, then a horde or zombies are going to be attracted. So you got to find the speaker. You suddenly see, okay, there's a lot of zombies coming. Suddenly a horde's coming at you, and you have to figure out what to do and how to get out of that situation. Whether it be, okay, start laying traps or like hop on your bike, go, let them pass, and like figure it out after that. I think it does a really good job in creating those movie like moments of, you against a zombie apocalypse, essentially.
Right. Not to be negative, but that leads me to one thing I think it could have improved was mostly I thought the gunplay was lacking. And I feel like if that gunplay was just better, I would have enjoyed those hordes just a tink. I already enjoyed them. But if I had really, really good third person gunplay, I feel like I would have had a much better time with them. The melee combat to me, if you want to compare it to, Sony first party games, it's among the best melee combat. Like, it has really good melee combat, but I thought the gunplay was lacking. That was the only negative I really saw with those hordes. I didn't like once I found my gun, which I think it was the little shorty. I think that's what it was called.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I got that gun, I was like, all right, I like this gun feels right. But a lot of those other guns, they weren't they weren't speaking to me. But besides that, yeah, no, the hordes were most definitely the best part of this game.
I think they hide what's really disappointing is I think they hide their good game gunplay specifically underneath their range skill tree.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I felt the same way that you did, Thomas, but once I specifically focused on like my melee and then survival, and gunplay was the last one I actually upgraded. But after I started upgrading that, to, have the recoil less on the gun, have your accuracy better, it started feeling a lot better for me. But it seems to be like a reoccurring kind of theme for the game to make you work for the mechanics to feel good, like the bike, like the gun, like it wants you to feel like you earn it, but at the same time it doesn't care if you're frustrated and getting continually frustrated during that process.
Right, I agree.
I felt like the guns never felt quite right to me until I was using them against the horde. And then it was like a light bulb moment went off where I was like, oh, this is why they feel this way. Because they work perfectly in this situation. And every other situation, the guns aren't as well suited for. But this is kind of why I maintain that I believe that Days Gone was created for the horde battles. Because the way that the guns work, the way that they're not like super accuracy dependent. Mm-hmm. You're not like, it's not about popping off headshots for the most part. That's because of the horde battles. You don't have time to line up your shots when you're running away from the horde. You're spraying and praying. So yeah, that's I think something that contributes to that idea that the combat is the way that it is because of the hordes.
I would say that some of them, because whenever I play third-person shooters, like my favorite gun is always a rifle, like super accurate rifle, just left, like that's my go-to gun in every game. And this game has so many different types of guns, and it does have a rifle. So when I picked that, like I was getting the headshots for the, tiny freakers easily. And I felt like it felt good. It felt like how I would expect any other game rifle to work. However, then when I'm stuck in the middle of nowhere and a horde is coming and I only have my rifle here, I'm screwed. Like in this game, unfortunately, you only get 3 guns to carry with you at any time, and you have to go to a gun locker or buy the specific gun from like a vendor in order to unlock it and get a gun that's suited to the situation that you're going into. The problem is, you can't really account for hordes, per se. You can't really account if you're going to be, ambushed by, an human camp. Like, it's the gun that you bring, like, they expect you to strategize beforehand a lot. Like, if you're going to a human camp, you need this specific gun. If you're going to face hordes, you need this specific gun. So it asks a lot of the player and doesn't really take into account dynamic events, unfortunately, by not allowing you to switch between guns.
I'm not even gonna hold you, man. When it came to the human enemies, I said fuck the guns. I'm just going straight melee whenever I could, because the melee feels really good. Like I can't stress that enough. Like it is very satisfying to use melee combat in this game, which a lot of games, as I've noticed, a lot of games don't get right. And I thought that this game did a really good job of the melee. So when it came to the human enemies, I didn't take any chances because you kind of do need to line up your shots. And none of the guns, even fully upgraded, none of them felt good. So once you upgrade all your melee skills, that's when I started I'm like, I think I'm having fun with this. Gameplay wise. I think this is actually getting pretty fun. Before that, it was a little frustrating because you're trying to play it like a third-person shooter, and it really isn't meant to be played that way. Even though it is a third-person shooter, kind of not meant to be played that way, which I thought was very interesting.
Well, we've been going on this game for quite a bit now. Let's just close on thinking about where this game was on its launch and the reception that it received. Days Gone sits at a 71 Metacritic for the PS4 version. I don't think the PC version is
77.
faring. 77. Okay, so it is better. What do you guys think about the critical reception to this game, the conversation around the game at the time of its release, and do you feel that something was missed there? Did they get it right on the mark?
I would say it feels 71 feels about right for where this game for what I played like 2 years later after it came. It feels it is a game with a lot of potential, and there was a lot that I did like, but there was a lot that I didn't like. Overall, I really enjoyed the game. Like I gave it the thumbs up, like you said. But kind of going back and looking at it, in the 2019 perspective when this game came out, I remember this game, them talking about it and say how, riddled with bugs it was at that time. And I'm trying to imagine what this game would have been like with even more bugs than it currently has. There's nothing currently game breaking about this game. I was able to enjoy it, like I said, but it's the little things like the dialogue not popping in exactly how it's supposed to be. Sometimes your bike doesn't spawn exactly where I left it exactly. Sometimes it would just disappear. It's just little things like that. But I could see the quality of life improvements that they have made in right now that I played it, and with all the quality of life improvements, I would definitely say it's around a 7, maybe 8, probably not a solid 7. It's a solid 7 game, and I really enjoyed it.
So OpenCritic has it at 73 too. The OpenCritic is just like all fans, right?
I think so, yeah. Oh.
Okay. What's the Metacritic user score?
That's a great question.
Oh, yeah. It seems like I remember when it came out, it fell very flat. It didn't sit well. But then you had this huge movement of people within the next few months, like gamers that were like, "Hey, this game is very underrated," and I feel like there's a huge crowd of people that really like the game. And, that's why I wanted to play it, because of this. I followed Greg Miller, Kind of Funny, and I remember he was so hyped on it because he played like a 4-hour preview session. And it was... My microphone's breaking. But he came out hyped on it, and he's a big open world guy. And then when it came out, he absolutely hated it too. I think 73 is right on the money, though. 70, 73.
I think this question is nuanced. Because I almost want to reject the hypothesis of, because I think that this game is in a weird spot. Because one, it's a Sony first party game. So there's expectations there. And I think that there was heavy expectations. This game also feels like an Assassin's Creed, a Ubisoft checkerbox game in a lot of ways too. And those games religiously get like 8 out of 10s and everything. So this game, I feel it's the first game that I think, it being a Sony first party, did it a disservice. Because I think there's a lot of expectations there. I think if this comes out on Xbox as well, it comes out Steam first day, I think a lot of people would have a different reaction to this game. With that being said, if I were to put my own grade on it, I'm in line with, I'd say, like 7.5. I think a 7.5 is fair, because I think what it does really well, it does, like, from a gameplay perspective, like in a lot of ways, especially with the hordes, it does very well. That story just takes out a lot of the wind out of its sails. So I would land on like a 75. So around, I think it's crazy that it got a 71 with all those bugs. So yeah, playing it, 60 frames, playing it with, checkerboard 4K. I thought it was a 7.5. I thought it was little less than, I think it was like in the solid department overall. Thumbs down, but just from a standpoint of the Sony first party lineage.
Yeah, I agree with you in a lot of ways here, Thomas. I think the PlayStation expectations really were too much for this game. It wasn't. It was never going to be on par with The Last of Us or
Right.
Ghost of Tsushima or excellent games on that level. But it is. I totally agree. It is on par with games in the Ubisoft sandbox category. Yeah, I enjoyed Days Gone just as much as I enjoyed Far Cry 5, for instance.
That's a fair comparison. That's a very fair comparison.
And so yeah, I do feel that this game was judged pretty harshly. I think most of the ways that I feel like I just disagree with a lot of the criticism, but feel that it should be just as criticized, just in different departments. This game was aiming very high for a studio that had never made anything of this ilk before, and it falls flat in a lot of ways, and then in many ways it succeeds. I think for instance the Hordes are an incredible achievement. I've never played anything in the game quite like the Hordes in Days Gone. I think I think whatever you feel about Deacon at the end of the game, the slow burn character treatment that they gave to him, I think worked ultimately in the games for the game. But there are plenty of pieces that just don't fit together right, and taken over the course of a game as long as this one. Those little pieces not quite fitting together right creates this friction that just rubs and rubs and rubs raw every bit of patience that many people have for this game. So yeah, it's hard to say exactly what it deserves, but it's a very complicated final product, and that's why I think this conversation was very interesting. So thank you guys for having it with me. Is there anything else you would like to add to this?
It's unfortunate that we're not going to get, a sequel to this to see, what Sony Bend could truly do with the lessons that they learned from this game, because I think they learned a lot. Like you said, this was a huge undertaking, and they tried to do a lot of things, and, some things didn't pan out, but some things did. But it will be, even though we won't be getting a sequel for this game in particular, it will be interesting to see if Sony Bend can do something special with their next game, and if they're going to be able to deliver, and what that will look like, especially if it's an open world kind of deal like what we got here. But like I said before, overall, I enjoyed it. If you want to play this game, or, if you're looking at this game, I would say definitely give it a try, but definitely be ready to force yourself to play the game for a couple hours before you start to like it, because that's what happened with me. In the beginning, it was not great. I didn't like this game, and then I eventually came around to its characters, its setting, its story, loose as it may be. It delivered for me at the end, and I had a good time smashing some zombies up.
Unfortunately, it feels like there's all these little pieces that are just slightly off, and it could be something great, if like everything, if the movement, if they just hammered that in a little bit, the gunplay, if it was tweaked a little bit, just it seems like they're just a little bit off on so many different areas, and like some of the writing stuff you were talking about, Ben, and like some of the characters, but I don't know. I feel like if they could have just fine-tuned some of these different sections, it would have came together into a really great product that like would have been among Sony's best.
I'm gonna say something controversial. So it might be because I've been drinking, but I would have loved to see this game with a different studio and a different engine. And not to speak ill of Ben, I love the Siphon Filter games. I played a bit of Uncharted Golden Abyss on my friend's Vita. Like they're not a bad developer by any means, but I would have loved to see, like, even if it was them, maybe they use the Decima engine. Maybe they get assistance from a Gorilla. Maybe they get assistance from someone, because something tells me this game feels like it was made in a vacuum. It has a similar feel to, let's say, Fallout 4, where Fallout 4 was made didn't feel like it was looking at the competition like Witcher 3, other big open world games. This feels like a game that was made, I think it was supposed to come out way earlier than it did, if I remember correctly. It feels like that. Like, I feel like this game, if it had come out, let's say 2016, or like early in the PS4's lifestyle, I feel like it would have hit a little differently. I feel like once you start comparing it to other Sony first party and thinking like, what could have some of these other studios have done with this same exact concept, but just you trim the fat. I would have loved to live in that alternate reality, but unfortunately we have the game we have now.
Yes,
And I
the
think it
sucker
turned out
punch.
pretty solid. But it could have been better.
Well, hopefully we will get to see what Sony Bend learned, both good and bad, from this game in their next outing. And maybe we'll do a book club on it then when it comes out. But until then, this has been the discussion of Days Gone. Thank you for tuning into Ben's Book Club. And don't forget to check out our weekly show, Dukes of Gaming. Until next time, keep reading games.